What's up, everyone? Thought I'd do a quick video today on one of my favorite topics lately, mountain biking. And I was asked by a friend a long time ago, actually by two friends, to put together a short video trying to explain how to get into the sport. Um, Per their experience, there's kind of a lot of vagueness and just a lot of things to navigate through. So I will attempt to demystify this sport for you guys, especially for a lot of my car friends who are into cars. And as you guys, my car friends might know, there are very distinct ways you can go with that hobby, and there are a lot of, like, the more you know, the more analysis paralysis ends up taking over. Okay, so I will try to keep it as simple as possible. My biggest challenge today will be to not talk so much. So I will try not to talk that much. I'll keep things fairly high level, because I love talking about cars. I love talking about mountain bikes, and I could literally talk here for hours. So I will do my best to keep this as short as possible. So some of the things I think we should cover today is, first of all, how to find your first bike if you don't already have one, what to look for as far as safety equipment, and how to find like your local trails in your area. And basically, like, once you are able to find your first bike, then what does that mean in terms of finding like your next real bike? That's when it gets really fun. So I'll keep going and stay tuned. So what's the first thing you got to do? Honestly, the first thing you got to do is you just got to get out there and ride. Forget about what fancy bike you want to buy. Forget about, carbon fiber this or, 12 speed that. Um, just get out there, find a decent mountain bike, and we'll go through how to do that in a second. And you just got to like build your pedaling muscles. You got to be able to get up to the hill and not feel like you're gonna die like halfway through or once you get to the top. So once you build those muscles, some people, it depends on your fitness level right now, but some people it may take, a few weeks, some may take 6 months. So it probably took me going once or twice a week, probably took me about maybe 3 months before I really felt like, I could get to the top of the hill without like feeling like I was just absolutely gonna die. I remember my first time out. Holy cow, it was fairly flat, and the reason why I say it was fairly flat was because I recently did that trail again, and I like hammered through it so fast. But the first time I had to stop like 3 or 4 times midway just to like catch my breath. I felt like my heart was pounding, wanting to leave my chest. It was just nuts. Okay, but you'll build it up, I promise. You'll be more comfortable. So the very first step is you just got to get out there and pedal. Find a decent bike. Doesn't matter like if it's a beginner bike or whatever, but I'll go through that in more detail in a little bit. Build those pedaling muscles, build the balance. So your brain has got to adjust to a balance. By the way, one thing that's really crucial in mountain biking later on, as you're learning how to build your balance, is that typically when we ride road bikes or when we ride casually or leisurely, we're mostly concerned about balancing left and right. We don't want to tip over, right? But when you're really active on a mountain bike, you're using way more muscles than that. You're going to be balancing your weight sort of front to back. So you'll be either pitched over the front during certain sections, or you'll be hanging over the back during certain sections. So you really have to move your body very, very, very actively. I just want to point that out as you're kind of going through that first part of mountain biking. So yes, first of all, build up those muscles. Okay, next, let's go over the safety equipment. None of us, at least most of you guys watching this who are buddies of mine, we're not really like what they say, spring chickens or whatever. We're not as young as we used to be. So I definitely encourage you wear the right type of protective equipment, because it will make your day from becoming a bad day. So I will go through what equipment I wear, and you guys can feel free to adjust, make modifications, add on, remove from this particular list of stuff. Okay, so this is basically most of the stuff that I bring with me on a normal trip to go mountain biking. All of this is pretty much automatic, and when I say automatic, every time I go and leave the house, I really just make sure I have my water bottle, my spare water bottle filled, because I put this much, if not slightly more than this, within my backpack. It's kind of like a camel pack, right? And there's a bladder in here. So that's pretty much all I bring with me. It's pretty much automatic. I don't spend too much time fussing around, but I do, like every trip, there are certain things that I put in the washing machine, like shorts. You're definitely going to want a chamois of some kind, especially starting out. This is kind of the padded, you know, padded nether region area that we don't need to spend too much time on, but you might want to get fitted for something like that. They're all over the place. You can even find them on Amazon, but your local bike shop's probably a good place to start. This is my full-size like head sock, and I wear this kind of like a bandana, only because it has the most surface area to collect sweat and keep it away from my eyes. If I use a normal standard headband, it's just not enough. I don't know if it's enough for anyone really who like sweats a normal amount. So I do maybe an hour minimum climb every time I go out. I bring with me 2 or 3 different kinds of eye protection. So I have another one here. This is a little bit more cheap, but I also have this Oakley, which is more of a transition lens. This gets a little darker in sunlight, photochromic or whatever their coin term is. But the thing I don't like about this is it doesn't get as dark. So I have my very sunny set over there, and this is more my everyday, like early morning, late night set, where it adjusts with brightness. Gloves, gotta wear gloves. Some people don't like to wear gloves, which is fine, but I find that gloves saves my hands from getting beat up in a fall very well. So these are recent ones that I've tried. I haven't washed them yet, but these are from Amazon, and I'll be honest, they were cheap, maybe $15, and actually I really like them because they're very thin and they breathe very well. The one reason I don't like them is I've only been on maybe a dozen or so rides, and it's already starting to fall apart. You can see like it's starting to spread in certain areas, like here, starting to come apart there, and you know, etc., etc. You get what you pay for, right? These are shin guards, so these protect your shins, and highly recommend these. And these are a set of, I don't use these anymore, but these are a set of kind of lightweight knee pads. I bought these first because I didn't want to spend too much money, but I also wanted to like not get something super bulky. So I bought these first. These are very easy to pedal in, and they're very lightweight, but they're very lightweight. So if you get in a crash, there's not really that much protection here as compared to something beefier, which I use now. This is what I use every day, every time I go out. This has kind of a special, you know, impact absorbing, very thin, like it's kind of a crazy spongy material made by IXS. It goes like this, IXS. This is elbow pads, and try on elbow pads if you can, because I bought these initially, and the one thing I don't like too much about these is, you know, maybe 1 out of 3 times it ends up like sliding down my arm, so it ends up over by my wrist instead of up by my elbow, if like the terrain gets crazy and I'm just like, you know, completely bouncing up and down. So, but they're good enough that I still have them, and they are comfortable enough that I still carry them, and I ride and I use them every day. So except for these kind of lightweight knee pads, I go with this, so these kind of pair up like that. These are my elbow pads, shin guard, knee pads, eye protection, gloves, and shorts. So mountain bike shorts are kind of special. They're a little bit heavier duty. They're not that loose, but not that tight. So definitely not like, you know, road bike or XC. XC stands for cross country, by the way. XC like lycra or spandex. Okay, so I don't know any mountain biker that actually wears like lycra or spandex, but these have good kind of durability, but they also have the right pocket shaped in the right way. So for example, these ones, if you can imagine pedaling, these will be in a like horizontal position that you can end up you know, putting things here without having to close and get to it with easy access. So mountain bike pants tend to be that way. So just a small minor thing to look at. And this is my primary helmet. This is made by Bell. It is kind of their almost top of the line, I think, if not the top of the line helmet that you can buy. This is DH rated for downhill, and I think that's the most you could get. Maybe this year it's changed, but I'm getting this warranted because the little screws here keep coming off, so I had to put Loctite on that. And this latch, and when I tighten it and close it, it only works on one side now, so it's kind of like cockeyed. But I think, you know, based on my conversations with them, they're gonna send me a new one, or they're gonna want this back, or somehow they're gonna warranty it. But the one thing I like about this, and this is maybe $200 or $300, is it's a convertible. So for the light trail days, which I actually don't do this very often anymore, I just usually end up wearing the full face. But on a light trail day, which I know I'm not going to get too crazy, it just ends up being a full half coverage helmet. So the one thing that makes the helmet good is how much of your dome it actually covers. Some of them don't go too far back. Oops, there goes that. Some of them don't go too far back and cover like the back of your head. Like this one was my first helmet, and this is more like, you know, what you see people wear today. It is obviously full open face, and I would be uncomfortable using this now. On this one, another feature on this is called MIPS. So MIPS technology. So what that means is the actual intersection of this like moves. So you can see that there's an intersection. It's hard to do with one hand, but it's sort of a floating, you can see that it's a floating like intersection. So that allows for more movement of your head. You can see that. That allows for more movement of your head internally. Oh, I think a trash truck is coming around. Let me come back to you. Okay, it took them a little bit, but they're done picking up the basura. So, okay, one of the things that I want to make sure I mention, and most often forgotten by even especially me when I was starting out, I didn't believe my friends when they said shoes are super important. Shoes for mountain biking is actually one of the first things next to the helmet that I would encourage people to buy the proper shoes for mountain biking. One of the reasons is, let's assume that you're starting out and you don't know what it's like to ride like the clipless, clipped on pedals, right? So you're riding the normal flat pedals like this one, and you're thinking that you're just gonna ride with normal like running shoes. That is typically okay starting out, but I'll be honest, like if you're starting out and you're using running shoes, you might be in for some possible pain, speaking from experience. So one of the issues, okay, so remember I said that you have these shin guards. I'll tell you one of the main reasons why you need these shin guards. Oh, on a side note, by the way, shin guards and elbow pads and things like that, and I always wear like a long sleeve, is not only for sun protection, but also like when you get in areas where the trail is unusually overgrown and you have these weeds like going all over the place, they tend to like whip you, like, you know, not in a good way. So Let's just leave it at that. But these also serve as protection for those. But okay, let's get back to this. So typically good riding position, you're going to be somewhere like that, right? Heels down, toes up. And this is on a descent, so you're going downhill. So real aggressive. You want a shoe that has very like the appropriate rubber compound that grips really well with today's modern pedals. So you can see these pedals are pretty grippy. Like these are pins that can be adjustable in height. And these are actually my backup pedals. My main pedals I actually sold in my other bike because I'm getting some other ones. But these are very flat. You can see, very strong. They take a beating, and they have specific pins that grip very well to the appropriate shoe. This shoe is made by 510. They actually don't make them anymore. I've had these for like 4 years, and I'm surprised that they aren't more beat up. I wish they made these because I would buy like 2 or 3 pairs of them. The reason why, they obviously still make 510. I think it's owned by Adidas, or they were bought out by Adidas. But this is a high cut or a mid-top one. It has good protection for your like ankle bone, you know, on both sides, which is what I want. On a low cut, your ankle's like fully exposed, which I don't really like. Most guys do ride a low cut though. Okay, so this has the right sole, and again, I'm gonna try not to talk too much here, but let's just say, for example, if you end up slipping this way and you slip off of pedals, so for example, you have really crappy, like, you know, Kmart brand pedals, then they don't really have this kind of grip, and you're on like running shoes, so you end up just slipping off. And those running shoes, by the way, have like thick soles, so this has a very thin sole. You're basically at one with the surface area here. You want to be as close to this pivot point as you can. In terms of feel, it's just like a world of difference. Okay, this has like good structural support, so it has good support this way, but it also has very good like toe protection. So okay, let's go to the first example. I'm like starting to ramble now. I'm gonna try to stop. If you slip this way, which can happen and happens more with shitty equipment, then what's next? Then these basically grind up on your shins, right? So you slip this way, your shins come down, your knees come down, and you're in for a world of hurt on your shins, which means it'd be nice if you had shin guards. All right, that hasn't happened to me in a while, but it did happen to me early on when I didn't have the right equipment. So next, if you're going to end up slipping this way, then usually you end up over the bars. But what's the first to come down? Your toes end up hitting the ground. Then the ground, as you're moving and the ground's kind of moving behind you here, then your toes like rub on the ground and you're losing toenails. It is like super painful. So I can't express enough how important shoes are and how important pedals are. Okay, maybe later if we have time we'll get to like grips and all these other things, but at the very least, get some good shoes and good pedals on any bike that you start on. Also, another like one of the myths that most people don't realize, and the road bike guys would know this, is that you don't necessarily want a seat that is like very plush or like, you know, super soft. You want something that just has a little bit of padding, because you'll find that you'll be able to ride longer that way once your sit bone muscles and kind of your butt muscles, you know, adapt to a proper seat. I'm kind of getting in the weeds here, guys, but different kinds of seats will have different widths. So this is the seat that I like. It's made by Specialized. It's kind of on the wider side, but it's because my sit bones, as I measure them, they sit kind of right here in the sweet spot. Some people's sit bones sit a little bit closer, some sit a little bit farther apart. It just depends. And I don't like a seat that is too far forward. Hang on, I'm gonna get another seat to show. Okay, this is the original seat that came with this Yeti. You can see that it is of a different shape. It is bigger. It's not as wide. It's not quite as wide, but it's longer, right? So these are one of the things that it's just going to take you time to figure out exactly what fits for your body. And I promise I won't get too far into the weeds here, as we can, you know, talk through more of this later when you're actually figuring out a bike that you want. But pretty much on a mountain bike, as you can imagine, you are like such a small or you are such a large overall fraction of the overall weight of the bike. The bike itself is just a small fraction of the total weight between you and the bike. And you know, your body positioning, your kind of the weight and everything, it makes such a big difference. Okay, so last thing for this part of stuff is, let's go through what I carry in my bag, just so you guys get an idea of what you may or may not need. This is my everyday backpack. I fill this up with water. I have a I'll show you here. This is a stance dart kit. So if you have a hole in your mountain bike from a thorn or a screw or whatever, or a gash, then this will tend to plug up most of those. I have a CO2 bottle here for emergency fill-ups. I don't know why I still have the wrapper on there, but I take that off. I have a tire pump. I use this every ride. Okay, I should probably try to find one that's smaller and lighter, but you car guys would know that tire pressure is like make or break, right? So if you guys are serious about motorsports, you know that tire pressure really matters. Here is a tire pump. So in case this isn't enough, or if I want to do it manually, this thing actually takes forever to pump. It's like 20 pumps per, you know, PSI or something. It's crazy. It takes forever. And that's kind of that. Let's see. Okay, additional headgear, some other water bottles. I have another shirt. I have a emergency, like if I really plan on going on a long ride, I will carry this along. It's another tire tube. So it's a 29er tire tube that I'll probably like end up, you know, strapping right there or something for a long ride. I have my backup. It's a fanny pack, but it has a water bladder in it. Now, some people really like that it sits on the hips. I kind of don't. So it just depends what you like. I like to wear this one on my back because as I'm climbing on a really hot day, I end up just strapping this helmet in the back and, you know, grind away at super low speeds. Now, obviously that may not be the smartest idea because you should be wearing your helmet all the time, but it's between that or basically boiling to death. What else do I have in here? I have way too much like stuff in here. Okay, so I have a extra pair of gloves. That's my winter set. I have some extra bottles. Oh, very important, sunscreen. Skin cancer is real, folks. Sunscreen is important. I have a couple of nighttime lights that I strap onto my handlebar. It goes right there for the night rides. Night rides are really fun. Always try to go with somebody though. Night rides are fun. Oh, and this is something you can really nerd out about. Okay, so let's see here. This is my first Garmin watch that I bought, and this is it has like the LED lights that are that's supposed to, as you put it on your wrist, it's supposed to measure your heart rate that way, but I found that it is wildly inaccurate. It kind of works, but not really. The response isn't really that great, so I ended up buying everyone's recommendation, which is this heart rate monitor chest strap. So this connects via some kind of Bluetooth or ANT technology to the watch, which then the watch records your heart rate. It shows your heart rate, you know, like right now that's, I don't know where it's getting the 82 from, because it can't read anything. I haven't worn it, but anyway, it shows your heart rate here and other like information. Like my last ride, for example, 2 hours 39 minutes at 10.58 miles. at is that Cadence? Probably Cadence, and other information. Okay, so if you really want to start monitoring like conditioning and start training and start being mindful of your heart rate and not maxing out but like increasing your stamina, it's incredible. Like this is a whole, like the biometric stuff is a whole new level of like geeking out. It's fun. Okay, so more stuff here. This is a shock pump. I always carry this with me because, as you might know later, these are air canisters. So this is basically air suspension on both sides. You'll find as you geek out more on mountain bikes, there's basically two main types of suspension. One is air suspension, or basically a air spring. So these are pressurized air in here and pressurized air in here, coupled with a damper, right? Damping technology hasn't really changed that much, and I'll go over that in a little bit. But the other type is with air suspension, you will need a shock pump. Like this gets pressurized up to like 300 psi, or somewhere around there. This gets pressurized to maybe up to 100. So you get to play with those. It's a whole level, new dimension. It's a new factor to play with in terms of your settings and adjustments. And it's actually really cool. This whole area of like air spring tuning is wild. It's like so much fun. The other type of suspension, or the other type of damping, is just your standard coil spring. So your average metal coil spring here, and some of them have an internal coil spring this way. Pros and cons: coil springs are heavier. I'll try not to get into the weeds again, but you should probably do some research on coil springs. And most bikes these days, most entry-level bikes, will come with air suspension. They're just more versatile. But in general, coil springs are heavier, but they're also like way more sensitive and they're faster. Okay, so I may end up putting a coil spring back here at some point, but right now I'm not really there to race. I'd rather have kind of that added adjustability of the air. Okay, notice I'm going off on tangents, and I'm really trying not to, but talking about mountain bikes, it's fun. Okay, this is a multi-tool. Always recommend you have at least one of these in your pack. This has all the tools to basically work on that bike. Now, if you're gonna work on this bike normally, this is really meant for like an emergency set, because you're gonna want, like, say for example, this 8mm that would probably fit. The 6 or the 8 tends to fit these pedals, and you're gonna want something bigger and more leverage than just this little tiny hand tool can provide. The one that I carry and I love is the one made by One Up. It's an EDC tool. This is, see if I can open it. Uh-oh, I just dropped it. Okay. This is an EDC tool, and it's kind of a multi-tool, and it goes in your steer tube down there. So I really like it. I use this like more often than I care to admit. It's actually really useful. So let's see, we talked about some of the random stuff that's in here. I have a Leatherman, which I hardly ever use, just extra weight, and I have a park tool. This is for the valves. So Presta and Schrader valves, different ones can use this setup. So you're gonna need to take this out every once in a while. Anyway, that's just something additional. And I have more stuff in here, but you get the picture. Now, lastly, what should we talk about? Not the NSX. That's a different issue. Let's close out this first part with the last thing you'll need to figure out is what kind of trails and where do you want to ride. Okay guys, I thought I'd just insert this video really quick about how I look for trails and how I try to find some new trails. And let's just get to it. These are the 3 different websites. Actually, there's like 5, okay? The different places you can look. I started out on MTB projects. I'm probably most comfortable with that website. But you can certainly go to All Trails, which will also tell you good trails, and Romero Canyon. Sorry, not Romero Canyon. Trail Forks. Trail Forks is a trail, an app. Also, all these come in the different apps. So MTB Project has an app, All Trails, Trail Forks. Obviously, Google Maps is another option. And Strava. Strava is a really good one, but lately they've locked down a lot of the good features to paid members. So if you're already on Strava, you're probably a paid member and you probably really know like the ins and outs of it. So let's just get started. If I want to try to find a trail in my local area, let's say I'm going to use a friend's zip code here, 91501. And he is, I believe, in the Burbank, Montrose area. So let's just say La Crescenta, first choice. Okay, so in most of these websites, by the way, you can specify trails that are mountain bike friendly, that are, mountain bike and like hiking and like motorsport vehicles like four-wheelers or two-strokes. But in general, there are a lot of trails that you may find that you should check because you might think, oh, that's a great looking trail, but it might be for hikers only. So, always try to maintain a good atmosphere between the hikers and the mountain bikers because I feel like a lot of times it gets a little bit touchy between those two groups. Even though I don't see that issue much anymore. So, okay, let's see what some of the options are in this area. So Super Strawberry, Eaton Saddle, El Prieto Loop, Sunset. El Prieto Loop and Sunset, I actually know those personally. I do these trails with my friends quite a bit. So let's just go to El Prieto. Someone mentioned on, let's just say, for example, someone mentioned on Facebook that El Prieto is a great loop to do, and I should go and do it in that area. By the way, the mountain biking groups on Facebook are really awesome too. So let's see if I can try to help you guys decipher this here. So first of all, according to this, the most reasonable way is you can start and end at this parking lot. So JPL just happens to be right here. So you're overlooking the JPL area here. But typically I found that the recommendations for parking lots are pretty good, but not always like the most optimal because these are sort of publicly sourced information or kind of crowdsourced stuff. In my opinion, I'm not sure how official these actual trail maps are. So take it with a grain of salt. It's actually pretty good, and I'm surprised when I started mountain biking that these things existed already. So this is a loop that I do when I'm in LA all the time. Like it's one of my favorites. It has a little bit of everything. And what it is, let me see if I can expand this map. What it is it is a green level climb. So you're basically on this trail called Fern. This is Fern right here. And I don't know if you're able to, Fern Truck Trail, right there. This is that. So you can see it highlights it. So now it's highlighted green. So this is Fern Truck Trail, this section right here. Okay. So it's a green climb or maybe a blue climb all the way up. It's basically like a fire road, which kind of turns into a single track at the top. And then it ends up, this is a fast downhill section, which you wouldn't know that necessarily by looking at this, but you'll know, like, let's say, for example, if you click Fern Truck Trail, right? And I'll try to make this really quick. Fern Truck Trail. This is Fern, right? Yep, so it's just this green section right there. It basically climbs all the way to the top, and you get to the top over here, which then starts a descent. This descent is fairly fast, it's flowy, and it's a little bit steep. So you're going pretty fast, but it's like really fun. But it's in a section that you don't necessarily want to have like any issues because it is like cliffside. So you don't want to like, be barreling down the cliff. Okay. So you can see that you can tell the characteristics of that trail by just looking at this map. Certain sections in red means this section is kind of like a little bit steep. Certain sections in green up here, because I know that trail personally, this top of the trail is like it flattens out a little bit. The slope flattens out before it comes down. So there are definitely these middle sections here which require a little bit more pedaling, probably like granny gear territory. You can see that it's a 15% grade right there. And that's the max grade that you'll experience on this particular trail. All right, so let's see, what else can we gather from this information? That's kind of it. There's most people characterize or vote up this trail as a blue, which I agree, it's probably a blue. So let's go back and let's actually look at just the downhill section, which is the El Prieto Trail. Okay, so this is just the downhill section of that trail. And you can see that it starts up at the top. Basically, you're descending for, I don't know what the variance is there, but it's a 20%, 21% max like steepness coming down, 8% average grade, there it is. So fairly steep, not super steep, but fairly steep. And it is rated a mostly black by most people. I would say, having done it several times now, I'd probably say it's more intermediate / difficult, but I could certainly understand why it would be rated a black. Let's just go back here. So let's just, to wrap this up, hopefully you got a chance to understand how to read one of these trail maps and look at ones in your area and kind of get an understanding what it's like. It's always useful to read these descriptions, but honestly, it doesn't mean much until you just start riding a whole bunch of different trails. Okay, you can read the comments. There's a bunch of comments, but a lot of times these are super old, like 2013, 2015. I haven't seen a new comment been put down in quite a while for these old trails. I don't know why that is, just not super active, I guess. Like, look, the last check-in is 2019, but I know people who ride these trails all the time. Like, I used to be on these like once a week. So just take that with a grain of salt. Ask around, ask your friends, ask your local bike shop. So the shortcut term is LBS. Okay, so ask your LBS what the great trails are in your area for the kind of riding that you want to do. All right. What else? I think that might be kind of everything. That's most of what I can think of right now. I'll eventually be going over on another video because this is already getting a little too long. What about bike geometry that you should be looking for in your first bike? So I will start to think about that and what I think would be important for you to try to figure out when really like spending good money on that very first bike. For now, just kind of, buy a bike. Maybe you'll use it for 3 months. Buy a used one or buy like a fairly inexpensive one that you could resell. It's kind of like, when you want to learn how to ride or how to be a good driver on the track. A lot of guys will end up buying, if they have the money, will buy like a McLaren or something. If you have the money, great, no worries. Like you'll work your way up to there. But I have found that, MIATA is always the answer. Starting off at kind of the MIATA level on mountain bikes makes more sense to me, because just to tell you a little bit about my story and the last 4.5 years of being in mountain biking, I bought a pretty, run-of-the-mill, entry-level, used Specialized stump jumper for like $1,100. Actually, that was a good deal back then because that was almost a brand new bike. I looked in Pink Bike, which I'll link below, which actually my friend Borhan Kuni helped me find this bike. I'll link that link below. Pink Bike is kind of like the Craigslist of bikes, which you can also find some on Craigslist. And this was a good entry-level bike. Then I bought a Specialized Enduro, which is kind of the big brother to that stump jumper. Stump jumper, by the way. Oh, garbage truck. It's garbage day. Is he gonna stop? Okay, he just went on. So, where was I? The Specialized Enduro was my first full carbon bike. I take that back. I think it was a carbon front triangle and a aluminum rear triangle. So again, this is what most people call the front triangle, and this is what most people call the rear triangle. Okay, I'll try to help you guys with terminology as best I can as we go here. And then I went to a transition Sentinel. That was my first full, like, brand new build. And you know, by then I was like a year or two into the mountain biking thing. I thought I knew what I wanted. I thought I was good enough, but a transition Sentinel is a pretty aggressive bike. It is a super long. The geometry is very like progressive, or very kind of, you know, new age. It needs to be ridden a certain way, just like this bike does. So right behind me is well, I'll get to that in a second. But then after, you know, once I was on the transition Sentinel, I always wondered, like, I just don't feel comfortable on this bike. I don't really know how to, I realize now I didn't know how to ride it back then. The geometry was just too long, it was too aggressive. I was like still trying to figure out, like, you know, I was still trying to figure out like how to properly ride a modern geometry bike, where you have to put a lot of your weight on. You have to be super active on the bike, so you got to like put a lot of weight on the front when you're turning. You got to hang out the back a little bit more when you're descending, like, just, you know, very, very active body positioning. And I was still trying to figure out like basic skills, essentially. As I'm looking back now, I thought I was pretty decent back then, but looking back now, I was still trying to figure out basic positioning skills on the bike. And I ended up really not liking that bike at all. It was hard to, in retrospect, at that time, I thought it was hard to pedal. It was just kind of too much bike. Okay. So then I moved to an Ibis Ripley after the transition Sentinel, and I love that bike. Like, it was really like a very friendly, it was like the MIATA that I wanted, you know. It was like a brand new Mazda ND MIATA, for you guys who kind of get the terminology. And it was very friendly. I learned so much on that bike. I learned more about body positioning because it was in a specific conservative geometry that it was just enough for me to figure out what it felt like to hang out the front without like going over the bars. It was enough, it was long enough to let me figure out what it was like to kind of hang in the back, you know, and like work on body positioning, etc., etc., etc. Then I then demoed a bunch of bikes in between before I got to this Yeti. And this Yeti is straight up a race bike. Like, this thing is fast. It is one fast mofo, okay? And I would not have appreciated this if I bought this bike early on. I would have been like, what is everyone talking about? What's the whole fuss about this whole thing? I can barely even ride it. My front skips out. I get no traction in the rear, blah, blah, blah. So I really feel like with mountain bikes especially, it's different than cars. I think cars are easier to adapt to the higher up you go because of, you know, electronic traction control systems and things like that. But with mountain bikes, your body is such a huge part of the component that if you don't know how to position yourself, and if you don't know how to train your body, and don't know like what the right techniques are, no fast mountain bike is going to help you. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what I'm trying to get across. So on the next video, we'll talk more about that. I think that will really this video has kind of gone long enough, but I think that will really help you understand at least what I went through. Again, you know, I'm just one guy, and you may be the kind of guy that could jump on a Yeti and just completely have fun right away. But I haven't really been serious about a bike since I was like 13 and trying to ride a BMX. So hopefully that little kind of part one helps you, and I'll follow up with another video about really jumping into in-depth about like maybe buying your first bike. So hope you guys enjoy. Be good to each other, be kind, and hope you all are having a good day. All right.